The contractions started 3 hours before dawn, and Emma Thornton knew with absolute certainty that she would face this alone. She pressed her palms against the rough wooden table in the small cabin, breathing through the pain that wrapped around her belly like iron bands, listening to the wind howl outside with a fury that promised no mercy. The November storm had been building for 2 days, and now the snow fell so thick and fast that she could barely see the barn 20 yards from her window. Her husband James had left for Salt Lake City 9 days ago to sell their cattle, promising to return within a week, but the roads were impassable now, buried under drifts that reached higher than a man's head. She had known this baby was coming early. The midwife in Beaver, Utah had warned her just 2 weeks prior that the child sat low and ready, but James had needed to make the sale before winter truly set in. They needed the money desperately. Their small ranch struggled in this harsh country, and another mouth to feed would strain their resources even further. Emma had assured him she would be fine, that Mrs. Henderson from the neighboring property would check on her, that the baby was not due for another 3 weeks at least. But babies came on their own schedule, and the blizzard had started the very day James should have returned. Now, at 22 years old, Emma faced the most terrifying experience of her life with no one to help her. She had moved to the rocking chair near the fireplace, keeping the flames high, and laid out the supplies she would need. Clean sheets, hot water, a sharp knife that she had sterilized in boiling water, twine to tie off the cord. She had attended one birth back in Missouri before coming west, helping her own mother when her youngest sister was born. She knew the basics, but knowing and doing alone were entirely different matters. The contractions grew closer together as the pale light of dawn struggled through the endless white curtain outside. Emma tried to keep track of time, but the pain consumed her world. She walked when she could, leaning against the furniture when the waves hit, breathing the way she had seen other women breathe. The cabin felt both too hot from the roaring fire and too cold from the wind that found every crack and crevice in the walls. She thought of James, wondered if he was trapped somewhere on the road, prayed he was safe in some town waiting out the storm. By mid-morning, the urge to push became overwhelming. Emma had spread blankets on the floor near the hearth where the warmth would keep the baby from freezing. She had pulled on her nightgown, knowing she would ruin it but not caring. Everything narrowed to the primal need driving her body. She bore down when her body demanded it, crying out with no one to hear except the wind. Sweat soaked her hair despite the cold drafts. Her hands shook with exhaustion and fear, but she could not stop. The baby was coming whether she was ready or not. Time lost all meaning. She existed only in the space between contractions, gathering strength for the next wave. Then, finally, blessedly, she felt the baby's head crown. One more push, then another, and suddenly a tiny, slippery body slid into her waiting hands. For one terrible moment the baby made no sound, and Emma's heart stopped. Then a thin wail filled the cabin, and she sobbed with relief so profound she thought she might faint. She had a son. A tiny, perfect son with a strong cry and flailing fists. Her hands trembled as she tied off the umbilical cord in 2 places the way she remembered, then cut between them with the knife. She wrapped him quickly in a clean blanket and held him against her chest, letting him find her breast. His cries quieted as he began to nurse, and Emma dealt with the afterbirth, cleaning herself and the baby as best she could with her limited strength. The exhaustion hit her like a physical blow once the immediate crisis passed. She managed to change into a clean nightgown, wrapped the soiled linens in a bundle to deal with later, and crawled into her bed with the baby tucked safely beside her. She built up the fire as high as she dared, knowing she would need to sleep, but terrified of letting the flames die. The cabin would become deadly cold within hours if the fire went out. She dozed fitfully, waking every time the baby stirred, feeding him when he fussed, checking constantly that he was breathing and warm. The storm showed no signs of abating. The world outside remained a white void, the snow piling higher against the walls. Emma tried not to think about what would happen when her meager supply of firewood ran out, or when the food in her pantry dwindled. She had perhaps a week's worth of both if she was careful. Surely the storm would break before then. Surely James would make it home, or someone from town would check on her, but the snow fell for 3 more days without stopping. Miles away, in a line shack 15 miles north of Beaver, Michael Wade stared at the same relentless storm and fought his own battle with worry. The 30-year-old cowboy had been checking fence lines for the massive Double R Ranch when the first snow started falling. He had made it to the emergency shelter with his horse just as the full fury of the blizzard hit. But now, he was trapped with dwindling supplies and a growing sense of unease he could not shake. Michael was not a man given to premonitions or superstition. He believed in hard work, straight dealing, and the evidence of his own eyes. But for the past 2 days, he had felt an persistent pull, an inexplicable certainty that someone needed help. He told himself it was just cabin fever, that being trapped in a 12 by 12-foot shack with nothing but a horse for company would make any man's mind play tricks. But the feeling grew stronger, not weaker, as the hours passed. He rationed his food carefully, fed his horse Buck the last of the grain, and waited for a break in the weather. Michael had lived in Utah for 8 years, working his way up from a green ranch hand to the Double Arctic's most trusted cowboy. He knew this country, knew its dangers and its rare moments of beauty. He had seen men die from exposure, from falls, from simple bad luck. The West did not forgive mistakes or weakness. But he had also seen extraordinary acts of courage and kindness, had witnessed the way people came together when disaster struck. On the 4th morning after the storm began, the snow finally stopped. The sky remained gray and heavy, threatening more, but the wind died to occasional gusts and the endless curtain of white finally lifted. Michael dug his way out of the line shack, the snow reaching his chest in places, and assessed the situation. The world had transformed into an alien landscape of white drifts and buried landmarks. He could see perhaps 50 yards before the snow-heavy air obscured everything. Buck nickered nervously when Michael saddled him. The horse had been cooped up too long and was eager to move, but Michael kept a tight rein as they broke trail through snow that sometimes reached the gelding's chest. They could not move quickly, but Michael turned the horse south toward Beaver anyway, still driven by that inexplicable feeling that he needed to check on something. The going was brutally slow. In summer, he could have covered the distance in 3 hours. Now, breaking trail through the massive drifts, he counted himself lucky to make a mile in an hour. Buck struggled valiantly, his breath coming in great clouds of steam, his coat soon soaked with sweat despite the cold. Michael stopped frequently to let the horse rest, and each stop felt like an agony of wasted time. He had been riding for perhaps 5 hours when he spotted a thin thread of smoke rising in the distance, barely visible against the gray sky. A cabin sat in a small hollow, nearly buried under the snow, smoke trickling from its chimney. Michael felt his heart rate increase, though he could not say why. Plenty of homesteaders lived in these parts. This was probably just a family waiting out the storm like everyone else. But something made him turn Buck toward the cabin instead of continuing toward town. As he drew closer, he saw that the door was completely blocked by a massive drift, and the windows were nearly covered. More concerning, the smoke from the chimney looked weak, the kind of thin smoke that came from a dying fire. He dismounted and began digging through the drift blocking the door, scooping snow with his gloved hands and calling out, "Hello, the cabin. Anyone home? You need help." No answer came, but he thought he heard something faint from inside. Michael dug faster, his arms burning with the effort. Buck stood behind him, sides heaving, too exhausted to do anything but wait. Finally, Michael cleared enough snow to pound on the door. "I am coming in. Do not be alarmed." He pushed the door open and was hit by a wave of cold air. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, and the cabin was frigid. It took his eyes a moment to adjust to the dimness, and then he saw her. A young woman lay in the bed against the far wall, covers pulled up to her chin, her face pale as the snow outside. For one terrible moment, Michael thought she was dead. Then she stirred, turning her face toward him, and he saw her eyes were open. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The baby." Michael's gaze dropped to the bundle beside her, and his heart lurched. A newborn, tiny and still, lay wrapped in blankets. He crossed the cabin in 3 strides, his mind racing. He stirred up the embers in the fireplace first, adding kindling and logs from the small pile beside the hearth. The wood caught quickly, flames leaping up, and immediate warmth began to spread through the small space. Then he turned to the bed, truly frightened for the first time. The woman looked like she had been through hell. Dark circles ringed her eyes, her lips were chapped and colorless, and she trembled constantly despite the blankets. The baby beside her was too still, and Michael's throat tightened. "How long?" he asked, gently touching the infant's cheek. The skin was cool but not cold, and to his immense relief, the baby stirred at his touch. 4 days, Emma managed to say. "Born 4 days ago, cannot get warm enough. Fire is almost out. No more strength." Michael understood immediately. She had been alone here, had somehow survived giving birth by herself, and had been slowly freezing as her strength waned and her firewood ran low. He stripped off his heavy coat and laid it over both mother and child, then went back outside to tend to Buck. The horse needed shelter and water, and Michael needed to think. He led Buck to the small barn he had spotted earlier, clearing snow from the door with difficulty. Inside, he found a milk cow lowing miserably, clearly in need of milking, and a few chickens huddled together for warmth. He took care of the animals quickly, his mind on the woman and baby in the cabin. Once Buck was unsaddled and rubbed down, Michael grabbed his saddlebags and hurried back through the snow. Emma had managed to sit up slightly when he returned, still holding the baby against her chest. The cabin was warming nicely now that the fire blazed, but Michael could see she was in rough shape. He had no medical training beyond the rough battlefield knowledge most cowboys acquired after years of dangerous work, but he knew she needed food, warmth, and rest. "I am Michael Wade," he said, trying to keep his voice calm and reassuring. "I work for the Double R Ranch. I am going to help you, but I need to know what supplies you have." "Emma Thornton," she replied, and he could hear the effort each word cost her. "Food in the pantry. Water in the bucket, but frozen now. My husband went to Salt Lake City. Should have been back before the storm." Michael found the pantry and took stock. Not much remained, but enough for a few days if he was careful. He melted snow for water, made a simple soup from dried beef and vegetables, and brought it to Emma once it was hot. She ate slowly, awkwardly holding the baby with one arm while managing the spoon with the other. "Let me hold him while you eat," Michael offered. "You need both hands." Emma hesitated, that natural maternal protectiveness making her reluctant, but finally she passed the baby to him. Michael took the tiny bundle carefully, shocked by how light the child was. The baby whimpered and squirmed, and Michael felt a fierce protective surge he had never experienced before. This tiny person had been born in the middle of a blizzard to a mother who had faced it alone. That took a kind of courage Michael could barely fathom. "What did you name him?" Michael asked as Emma ate. "Thomas," she said softly. "After my father, Thomas James Thornton." "That is a good, strong name." Michael looked down at the baby's small face, the eyes that could not quite focus yet, the tiny hand that had escaped the blanket and waved in the air. "You are a fighter, Thomas, just like your mama." Emma finished the soup, and Michael could see color returning to her face. He made her drink water as well, knowing she needed fluids for nursing. Then he took stock of the situation more thoroughly. The cabin was small but well built, meant for a young couple just starting out. One main room served as kitchen, living area and bedroom with a loft overhead that was likely used for storage. A door in the back probably led to a root cellar. "How are you feeling now?" Michael asked once Emma had eaten and nursed the baby again. "Better," she admitted. "I thought we were going to die. I kept trying to get up to tend the fire, but I was so tired. Everything hurt. And I was terrified that if I fell asleep, I would not wake up and Thomas would freeze." "You are safe now," Michael assured her. "I will keep the fire going and make sure you both stay warm and fed. We will wait out the storm, and then I will ride to town to find your husband or send word." But Emma shook her head, tears suddenly spilling down her cheeks. "What if something happened to him? What if he is dead somewhere on the road and I am alone with a baby in the middle of winter? How will I manage?" Michael did not have an answer for that. He had seen too much tragedy in the West to offer empty platitudes. Instead, he said firmly, "One problem at a time. Right now, you both need rest and warmth and food. That is what we will focus on. Tomorrow will handle itself." Over the next few days, Michael settled into a routine of caring for Emma, the baby, and the animals. He chopped more firewood from the small stand of trees behind the cabin, breaking trail through the snow to reach them. He milked the cow and collected eggs from the chickens, supplementing their meager supplies. He cooked simple meals and kept water boiling on the stove constantly, knowing Emma needed to stay hydrated. Emma regained her strength slowly. The first day, she barely left the bed except for necessary tasks. By the second day, she could sit in the rocking chair for short periods, holding Thomas while Michael worked. By the third day, she was moving around the cabin more easily, though still exhausted and sore. They talked during those long hours trapped inside by the continuing snow. Michael learned that Emma had come west from Missouri 2 years prior with James, her husband of 3 years. James was a dreamer, she said with obvious affection, convinced they could make their fortune ranching if they just worked hard enough. They had struggled constantly, but they had been building something together. "He wanted this baby so much," Emma said, gazing down at Thomas. "He talked about teaching him to ride, to work cattle, to love this land the way he does. I was terrified of giving birth out here, but James kept saying everything would be fine, that we would have the midwife and plenty of time. And then everything went wrong." Michael shared his own story in turn. He had come west from Texas after his father died, looking for work and a fresh start. He had tried prospecting for a while, then realized he was better with horses and cattle than with a pick and pan. The Double R Ranch had given him steady work, and he had saved most of his pay, thinking someday he might buy a small spread of his own. "Never thought I would want that," he admitted. "Used to think I liked moving around, not being tied down. But lately, I have been thinking it might be nice to have a place that was mine, somewhere to put down roots." "It is harder than you think," Emma said, "but also better in some ways. Having something that is yours, that you built with your own hands and sweat, there is satisfaction in that." On the fourth day after Michael's arrival, a full week after Thomas was born, the weather finally broke properly. The sun emerged for the first time, brilliant and blinding on the white landscape. Michael knew he needed to ride to town, to find out if anyone knew what had happened to James Thornton, and to let people know that Emma and the baby were alive and well. But when he suggested it, Emma looked so frightened that he paused. "What if no one knows where James is?" she asked. "What if he just never came back?" "Then we will figure it out," Michael said firmly. "But you need to know one way or another. And I need to get word to the ranch that I am all right. They will be worried." Emma nodded reluctantly, and Michael saddled Buck in the bright morning light. The horse was well rested and eager to move, and the going was much easier now that the snow had settled and crusted over. Michael made good time to Beaver, arriving in town by early afternoon. The town was slowly digging itself out from the massive storm. People shoveled pathways between buildings, and worried conversations filled the air about livestock losses and roof collapses. Michael went straight to the sheriff's office, a small building near the center of town. Sheriff Tom Morrison looked up when Michael entered, his weathered face creasing with concern. "Michael Wade, right? From the Double R, we wondered if you boys made it through all right." "I was in the line shack up north when the storm hit," Michael explained. "Made it out fine, but I found something on my way back. The Thornton place, about 5 miles northeast of here. Emma Thornton gave birth alone during the storm. She and the baby are alive, but she has not heard from her husband. He was supposed to be back from Salt Lake City before the weather hit." The sheriff's expression grew grave. "James Thornton. Yeah, I know who you are talking about. He passed through here about 10 days ago, heading up to the city with a small herd. Said he would be back in a week." He paused, clearly troubled. "We have not heard anything from him, but the storm was bad, Michael. Real bad. Could be he is holed up somewhere waiting it out." "Or he could be in trouble," Michael said quietly. "Or that," the sheriff agreed. "I will send word up north, see if anyone knows anything, but it might be a while before we hear back. The roads are still damn near impassable." Michael felt a weight settle in his chest. He had hoped for better news, something he could bring back to ease Emma's worry. Instead, he had only uncertainty. "I am going back to the Thornton place," he said. "Emma and the baby need someone there, at least until we know what happened." "That is decent of you," Sheriff Morrison said. "Most men would consider they had done their duty and move on." "She gave birth alone in a blizzard," Michael said simply. "Saved herself and the baby with no help. She deserves better than being abandoned now." He stopped at the general store to buy supplies, using his own carefully saved money to purchase coffee, flour, sugar, salt pork, and other staples. Then he rode back out to the cabin, arriving as the sun began to set. Emma met him at the door, hope and fear warring in her eyes. "No word yet," Michael said gently, "but the sheriff is going to send inquiries. We will find out what happened." Emma's shoulders sagged, but she nodded. "Thank you for coming back. I was afraid you would not." "I gave you my word," Michael said, surprised she would doubt him. "Besides, I am not leaving you and Thomas out here alone, not until we know you will be all right." Something shifted between them in that moment, some unspoken understanding. Michael stayed, falling back into the rhythm of caring for the small household. Days passed into a week, then 2. Michael rode to town twice more, checking for news, but there was none. The roads to Salt Lake City were slowly being cleared, but it was slow work, and no one had reported seeing James Thornton. During those weeks, Michael and Emma grew closer in ways neither had anticipated. They worked together to keep the cabin warm and the animals tended. They took turns walking the floor with Thomas when he cried in the night. They talked for hours about their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Michael found himself watching Emma when she nursed the baby, struck by the fierce love on her face. Emma caught herself noticing the gentle way Michael handled Thomas, the patience he showed with the animals, the competence with which he managed every task. Neither spoke of the growing attraction between them. Emma was a married woman, and Michael was an honorable man, but it was there nonetheless, unacknowledged but undeniable, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire in the hearth. The truth came 6 weeks after the storm, delivered by Sheriff Morrison himself. Michael was chopping wood when he saw the lawman riding up the trail, and his stomach clenched with dread. Emma came to the door, holding Thomas, her face going pale. "Mrs. Thornton," the sheriff said, removing his hat. "I am afraid I have bad news. We found your husband. He was caught in the storm about 30 miles north of here, tried to shelter in a cave but did not make it. I am sorry. There was nothing anyone could have done." Emma swayed and Michael dropped the axe to catch her. She clutched Thomas to her chest, her breath coming in short gasps. "Are you certain? Could there be any mistake?" "No mistake," the sheriff said gently. "We brought him back to town, gave him a proper burial. He is in the cemetery next to the church. I am very sorry for your loss." After the sheriff left, Emma sat in the rocking chair and stared at nothing, tears sliding silently down her face. Michael tended to Thomas, fed Emma when she would not do it herself, and kept the cabin running while she processed her grief. He expected her to fall apart completely, but she was stronger than that. By the next morning she was up and moving, her eyes red but her jaw set. "I need to go to town," she said. "I need to see his grave." Michael hitched the horse to the small sledge behind the barn, creating a more comfortable ride than horseback would have been. He drove Emma and Thomas to Beaver, waited quietly while she stood at the fresh grave, her hand resting on the wooden cross that bore James's name. She did not cry there, just stood silently for a long time before turning away. On the ride back, she finally spoke. "I do not know what I am going to do. I cannot run the ranch alone, not with a baby, but I have nowhere else to go, and this place is all I have left of James." "You do not have to decide today," Michael said carefully, "or even this month. You need time to grieve, to heal from the birth. The rest will sort itself out." But over the following weeks, as winter began to loosen its grip and the first hints of spring appeared, Michael knew he was facing a decision of his own. He had been living at the Thornton cabin for nearly 3 months now. The ranch hands at the Double R assumed he had died in the storm until he finally sent word that he was alive and helping a widow. His boss had been understanding, but had made it clear that Michael needed to return or give up his position. The problem was that Michael no longer wanted to leave. Somewhere between digging through the snow to find Emma and holding Thomas while she cooked dinner, between chopping firewood and mending fences and talking late into the night, he had fallen completely and irrevocably in love with Emma Thornton. He knew it was too soon, that she was grieving, that she might never see him as anything more than the man who had helped her in a crisis. But he also knew he could not just walk away. The thought of leaving her and Thomas alone was physically painful. Emma wrestled with her own feelings during those same weeks. She had loved James, truly loved him, and his death left a ragged hole in her heart. But if she was honest with herself, theirs had been a comfortable love, warm but not burning. They had been partners and friends, building a life together, but she had never felt the kind of passionate intensity that the novels she had read as a girl described. What she felt when she looked at Michael was different. It was fierce and consuming, a pull so strong it frightened her. She noticed everything about him, from the way he handled Thomas with such gentle competence to the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. She found excuses to touch him in passing, her hand on his arm when she thanked him for something, their fingers brushing when they both reached for the same dish. She told herself it was too soon, that she was being disrespectful to James's memory. But she also could not ignore the way her heart raced when Michael walked into the room, or the disappointment she felt when he talked about returning to the Double R. The turning point came on a warm April afternoon. The snow had finally melted except in the deepest shadows, and the world had exploded into life. Green grass pushed up through the brown remnants of winter, and the first wildflowers dotted the hillsides. Michael was repairing the corral fence when Emma came outside with Thomas, letting the baby feel the sunshine on his face for the first time. "He loves it," she said, laughing as Thomas squinted and waved his arms. "Look at him." Michael set down his hammer and walked over, unable to resist the baby's infectious joy. Thomas was growing so fast, no longer the tiny, fragile newborn Michael had first seen. His eyes focused now, and he smiled at familiar faces, and his grip was surprisingly strong when he grabbed Michael's finger. "He is thriving," Michael said softly. "You have done an amazing job with him, Emma." "We have done an amazing job," Emma corrected, looking up at him. "I could not have managed without you, Michael, you know that." They stood there in the sunshine, close enough to touch, and Michael felt the words pushing at his throat. He should not say them. It was too soon, too presumptuous, but they came out anyway, quiet and honest. "I do not want to leave." "I know I should. I know you need time and space to grieve properly. But I cannot stand the thought of going back to the ranch, of only seeing you and Thomas on occasional visits. I want to stay, Emma. I want to help you run this place, to help you raise Thomas. I want to be part of your life." Emma's breath caught. She looked down at the baby in her arms, then back up at Michael, and he saw his own feelings reflected in her eyes. "I do not want you to leave either," she whispered. "Is that terrible of me? James has been gone barely 2 months, and already I am thinking about you in ways I should not." "There is no should or should not," Michael said, taking a careful step closer. "There is just what we feel and what we do about it. I fell in love with you, Emma. I think I started falling the moment I saw you lying in that bed, fighting to keep yourself and Thomas alive. You are the strongest, bravest person I have ever met, and I would count myself lucky to spend the rest of my life standing beside you." Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks, but she was smiling. "I love you too. I did not want to, I felt so guilty about it, but I cannot help it. You are kind and steady and good, and you love Thomas like he is your own. James would have liked you, I think. He would have wanted someone like you to take care of us." Michael reached out and cupped her face gently, wiping away her tears with his thumb. "I will take care of you, both of you, for as long as you will let me. I promise you that." "Yes," Emma breathed. "Yes to all of it. Stay, Michael. Please stay." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, while Thomas cooed between them and the spring sunshine warmed their faces. It was a beginning, fragile and new, but also somehow inevitable. They had been forged together in crisis, and now they would build something beautiful in its aftermath. They were married in early June, a small ceremony at the church in Beaver with just a few friends present. Emma wore a simple blue dress that had been her mother's, and Michael wore his best shirt and the new vest he had purchased specially for the occasion. Thomas attended in Emma's arms, gurgling happily through the short service. Sheriff Morrison stood as witness, along with the ranch foreman from the Double R. Michael had given his notice at the ranch and used his saved wages to buy supplies and a few head of cattle. He and Emma would build the ranch together, starting small but with big plans. It would not be easy, they both knew that, but they had already survived the worst that nature could throw at them. Everything else felt manageable by comparison. Their first year of marriage was hard work and simple joys. They expanded the garden, added chickens to their small flock, and carefully grew their cattle herd. Michael proved to be an excellent rancher, with an eye for good stock and a willingness to work from dawn until dark. Emma managed the household with quiet efficiency, caring for Thomas while also helping with the outside work whenever she could. Thomas grew into a lively, happy baby who loved his mother fiercely and began calling Michael Papa as soon as he could form words. Michael never corrected him, and Emma never suggested he should. James would always be Thomas's father by blood, but Michael was the only father the boy would ever know. Their neighbors accepted the quick remarriage with varying degrees of approval, but most understood the realities of frontier life. A woman alone with a baby had few options, and Michael Wade had proven himself a good man. If they had found love in the process, so much the better. 2 years after their wedding, Emma discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she had Michael beside her from the beginning, and when the baby came in early autumn, it was with the midwife in attendance and Michael pacing nervously outside. They had a daughter this time, a tiny girl with Michael's dark hair and Emma's blue eyes. They named her Sarah Marie Wade, and Thomas was ecstatic to have a baby sister. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch slowly prospered as Michael's hard work and good decisions paid off. They added a room onto the cabin, then another, until it was a proper house. They bought more land, more cattle, and hired their first ranch hand. Thomas grew into a sturdy boy who followed Michael everywhere, learning ranching from a master. Sarah was a bright, curious child who kept Emma constantly busy. Michael and Emma's love deepened with each passing year. They worked side by side during the day and fell into each other's arms at night. They weathered droughts and hard winters, sick animals and broken equipment, all the challenges that came with ranching in Utah. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. On their 5th anniversary, Michael took Emma to the hilltop behind their house at sunset. The valley spread below them, their house and barn and corrals, the cattle grazing peacefully, the smoke rising from the chimney where their children waited with the hired girl who watched them for the evening. "I have been thinking about that day I found you," Michael said, his arm around Emma's waist. "How close we came to losing everything before it even began. If the storm had lasted one more day, if I had not felt that pull to check on you, if any single thing had been different." "But it was not different," Emma said, leaning into him. "You did come. You saved us, Michael. You saved Thomas and me, and then you gave us a life better than I ever dreamed possible." "You saved me too," Michael replied. "I was just drifting before, no real purpose or direction. You and Thomas gave me something to live for, something to build. You made me want to be a better man." Emma turned in his arms and kissed him deeply, pouring 5 years of love and gratitude into it. When they finally pulled apart, she smiled up at him. "We saved each other then. And we will keep doing it, every day, for the rest of our lives." They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and red, holding each other and watching their world below. It had started with a blizzard and a desperate woman giving birth alone, with a cowboy who followed his instincts and dug through impossible snow. It had grown into this, into a family and a home and a love that would endure whatever came next. 3 years later, Emma gave birth to twins, 2 boys they named Matthew and Marcus. The house grew more chaotic and more full of love. Thomas, now 9, took his role as big brother seriously, helping with the younger children and learning more responsibility on the ranch. Sarah, at 5, was a little mother to the twins, always fussing over them. The ranch continued to prosper. Michael's reputation as an honest dealer and skilled rancher spread, and buyers sought out their cattle specifically. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, and that was more than many could say. Emma sometimes thought about James, especially on the anniversary of his death, or when she saw Thomas do something that reminded her of his biological father. She felt no guilt anymore about loving Michael. She had come to understand that the heart was big enough for both gratitude for what had been and joy in what was. James had given her Thomas and brought her to this land. Michael had saved her life and built a future with her. Both men had shaped who she was, and she honored both by living fully and loving deeply. On a cold November afternoon, nearly 11 years after that terrible blizzard, Emma stood at her kitchen window watching Michael teach the twins to rope fence posts while Thomas worked with the ranch hands and Sarah helped her bake bread. The scene was so perfectly ordinary and yet so precious that she felt tears sting her eyes. Michael caught her watching and waved, his smile bright even across the distance. She waved back, her heart full to bursting. This life, this beautiful, messy, full life, had started in the darkest moment she could imagine. She had given birth alone in a blizzard, certain she would die, and instead she had found a love deeper than any story, a family richer than any dream. That evening, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Michael pulled Emma close on the porch where they often sat on mild nights. The November air was crisp, but not yet bitter, and the stars blazed overhead in the clear darkness. "Happy anniversary," Michael said softly. It was not their wedding anniversary, but the anniversary of the day he had found her, and they marked it every year as the true beginning of their life together. 11 years, Emma marveled. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. Both, Michael agreed. We were different people then. Younger, more frightened. You had just lost James, and I was just a drifting cowboy with no ties. And now look at us, Emma said, laughing softly. 5 children, a working ranch, roots so deep in this land that I cannot imagine being anywhere else. No regrets. Michael asked, though he knew the answer. Not a single one, Emma said firmly. Oh, I wish James had lived to see Thomas grow up. I wish the circumstances had been different, but I cannot regret where we ended up. I love you, Michael Wade. I love the life we have built and the family we have made. I love you too, Michael said, kissing the top of her head. More than I can ever put into words. You are my whole world, Emma. You and those 5 wild children we are raising. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the gentle lowing of cattle and the distant cry of a coyote. This was home, solid and real, built on a foundation of survival and strengthened by years of partnership and love. The years continued to roll by, bringing changes and constants in equal measure. Thomas grew into a fine young man, strong and capable, eventually marrying a girl from a neighboring ranch and building his own house on the property. Sarah became a schoolteacher in Beaver, riding back and forth each day with a pile of books and a head full of ideas. The twins developed distinct personalities despite their identical faces, one quiet and thoughtful, the other boisterous and brave. Michael and Emma aged together, their hair graying and their faces lining, but their love never diminishing. They became grandparents, watching Thomas's children play in the same yard where their own children had grown. The ranch passed through good years and lean years, but it endured, a testament to their hard work and partnership. On a warm summer evening, nearly 30 years after Michael had dug through the snow to find Emma, they sat together on the expanded porch of their now substantial house. 3 generations of family filled the yard, children playing while adults talked and laughed. A long table had been set up for dinner, laden with food that Emma and her daughters and daughters-in-law had prepared. "Did you ever imagine this?" Emma asked Michael, her hand in his as always. That day you found me, did you have any idea we would end up here? Michael thought about it seriously. I knew you were special from the first moment. The courage it took to survive what you went through, to bring Thomas into the world alone and keep him alive until I got there. I knew I was looking at someone extraordinary, but did I imagine this exact life? No, it is better than anything I could have imagined. We were so young, Emma said. I was 22, you were 30. We had no idea what we were doing. We figured it out, Michael said with a smile. Together. Thomas approached the porch then, his own son on his shoulders. He was 40 now, a man in his prime, but Emma still saw traces of the tiny baby she had brought into the world during that terrible blizzard. Mama, Papa, dinner is ready. We are just waiting on you two. Papa, Emma repeated softly after Thomas walked away. He had called Michael that from his first words, never questioning it, never making a distinction between Michael and the father he had never known. You gave him that. You gave him a father when he could have grown up alone. He gave me just as much, Michael said. He and you gave me a purpose, a reason to be the best man I could be. They joined the family at the long table, Michael at one end and Emma at his right hand as always. The meal was loud and chaotic, with children interrupting and multiple conversations happening at once. It was perfect. After dinner, as the sun set in another spectacular display of color, Emma found herself watching her family with the same sense of wonder she had felt for 30 years. So much life had come from that one terrible night. So much love had grown from such desperate circumstances. She thought about the young woman she had been, terrified and alone, fighting to survive. She thought about the cowboy who had followed an instinct and refused to leave her when he easily could have. She thought about how fragile it had all been, how many ways it could have gone wrong, but it had not gone wrong. Against all odds, they had survived. They had not just survived, they had thrived. They had built something beautiful and lasting, a legacy of love and hard work that would continue long after they were gone. Michael caught her eye across the chaos of the family gathering and smiled, that same warm smile that still made her heart flutter after 3 decades. She smiled back, and in that exchange was everything, all the love and gratitude and joy of a life well lived together. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Emma sent up a silent thank you to whatever force had guided Michael to her cabin that day. Whether it was fate or divine intervention or simple coincidence, she was grateful for it. That single decision, to turn aside and check on a thin line of smoke in the distance, had changed everything. The night grew cooler, and families began packing up to head home or to the various houses now dotted around the expanded ranch property. Michael and Emma stood together on the porch, waving goodbye, their arms around each other. Another good day, Michael said contentedly. Another good day in a life full of them, Emma agreed. I never get tired of these moments, Michael. I never take them for granted. Neither do I, he said. Not after how close we came to never having any of this. They went inside as the last wagon pulled away, the house quiet now after the chaos. They checked the locks, banked the fire, climbed the stairs to their bedroom. These ordinary rituals had become sacred through repetition, the small actions that made up a shared life. In bed, Emma curled against Michael's side as she had for 30 years, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. They did not need words anymore. They knew each other too well, loved each other too deeply, for words to be necessary. "Good night, my love," Michael whispered into her hair. "Good night," Emma replied. "Thank you for digging through that snow." "Thank you for surviving until I got there," he answered. It was an exchange they had repeated countless times over the years, a reminder of where they had started and how far they had come. Emma drifted off to sleep feeling safe and loved, surrounded by the life they had built together from the ashes of tragedy. The years continued their inevitable march. Michael and Emma grew old together, their hands gnarled from work, but still reaching for each other. They watched their children build their own lives and their grandchildren grow. They celebrated marriages and births, weathered losses and setbacks, always together, always a team. When Michael died at 78, peacefully in his sleep, Emma grieved deeply but without regret. They had been blessed with 48 years together, years full of love and laughter and hard work. She had his children and grandchildren around her, and the ranch they had built still thrived under Thomas's capable management. Emma lived another 5 years, surrounded by family, before passing quietly in the same bedroom where Thomas had been born so many years before. Her children and grandchildren gathered for the funeral, and as they laid her to rest beside Michael in the Beaver Cemetery, they spoke of the love story that had begun with a blizzard and a cowboy's intuition. It became family legend, passed down through generations. The story of how Emma had given birth alone when the snow blocked all roads, and how Michael had dug through impossible drifts to find them. How that moment of crisis had forged a love that lasted a lifetime and created a family legacy that endured. In the Beaver Church archives, someone recorded the story for posterity, making sure future generations would know about the strength of their ancestor and the cowboy who loved her. It became part of the town's history, one of those stories that embodied the spirit of the West, of survival and determination and love that overcame every obstacle. The ranch remained in the family, passed from generation to generation, each adding their own chapter while honoring the foundation Michael and Emma had laid. Thomas's descendants still worked the land, raised cattle, and told the story of their great-great-grandmother who survived the impossible. And on winter nights when the snow fell thick and fast, descendants of Michael and Emma would gather by the fire and remember. They remembered the courage it took to face childbirth alone in a blizzard. They remembered the cowboy who refused to pass by someone in need. They remembered the love that grew from those desperate circumstances, a love so strong it shaped generations yet to come. The cabin where it all began still stood, preserved and maintained, a testament to where the family story started. Visitors to the ranch were always taken there, shown the hearth where the fire nearly died out, told about the bed where Thomas was born, reminded of the snow that nearly buried everything. But more than the physical place, the story lived in the hearts of those who came after. It reminded them that strength came in many forms, that love could bloom in the unlikeliest circumstances, that one person's decision to help could change everything. It taught them about resilience and compassion, about partnership and commitment, about building something lasting from the rubble of tragedy. Michael and Emma's story was not just about survival, though that was miraculous enough. It was about choosing love when it would have been easier to walk away, about building a family from broken pieces, about creating beauty from devastation. It was about two people who met in the worst possible circumstances and decided to make the best possible life together. And in the end, it was about legacy, not just the ranch or the children or the material things they left behind, but the example they set. They showed everyone who came after them that true love was not just passion and romance, though they had plenty of both. True love was showing up every day, working side by side, choosing each other again and again through good times and hard times. It was a cowboy digging through impossible snow because something told him someone needed help. It was a woman finding the strength to survive the unsurvivable for the sake of her child. It was two broken people building something whole together. It was a lifetime of small moments adding up to something extraordinary. That was the real story, the one that mattered. Not just that Emma gave birth alone when the snow blocked all roads and the cowboy dug through and found them, but what they built after, the life they created, the love they shared, and the family they raised. That was the legacy that endured, written not in stone but in the lives of everyone who came after, carrying forward the strength and love of the two who started it all.